What if I told you that one of the most significant chapters of the human story isn't written in stone tablets or buried in desert sands, but is resting silently on the seafloor, waiting for us to find it? What if the legends of a great flood, of a world lost to the waves, weren't just myths? Imagine a place, a real place, that holds the key to understanding our most ancient ancestors, a world that vanished beneath the ocean. We often look to the stars for the next frontier of exploration. But right here, on our own planet, beneath the waves of Southeast Asia, a lost continent has just begun to give up its secrets. This isn't a story about a mythical city of gold like Atlantis. It's something far more profound. It's the story of a real inhabited landscape from the Stone Age, a world that has just shown itself. And the proof? It's tangible, it's undeniable, and it's rewriting what we thought we knew about human history. I'm talking about skull fragments. I'm talking about thousands upon thousands of fossils, a breathtaking archive of a bygone era. And I'm talking about a drowned world, a vast forgotten landmass that scientists call Sundaland. I'm kicking off our journey in a place most maps forget, the seafloor of Indonesia. For centuries, this region has been a crossroads of trade and culture, but its deepest history, the story written before the water rose, has remained hidden, until now. In a landmark 2025 expedition, a team of marine archaeologists and paleontologists, guided by new high-resolution seafloor maps, made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. They pulled Homo erectus skull fragments from the underwater sediments. Let that sink in. This is not a myth. This is not a rumor circulating on the fringes of archaeology. These are the actual remains of our ancient human ancestors, found precisely where their world used to be before the sea claimed it. Homo erectus, one of the most successful and long-lived hominins in our family tree, walking these very grounds. And this wasn't an isolated find. Here's the true scale of what they uncovered. Over 6,000 animal fossils were recovered from the same site. These remains belong to at least 36 distinct species. Imagine a mixed crowd of ancient deer, their antlers larger and more complex than any we see today. Think of herds of wild cattle, powerful and formidable, grazing on vast plains. And of course, the predators that hunted them, their fossilized teeth and claws a testament to the dangers of this ancient world. It's like a perfect frozen snapshot of a lost ecosystem, preserved for over 100,000 years beneath the waves. But the story gets even more personal, because the bones, they're not just bones, they are artifacts. They are evidence of action. Many of these animal bones bear clean, precise cut marks. They are sharp, repeated, and clearly intentional. These aren't the random scratches of a carnivore's teeth or the abrasion of river gravel. This is the signature of a tool-wielding hand. That's hunting. That's a planned, coordinated effort to bring down large game. That's butchery. The systematic processing of a carcass to extract meat, marrow, and hide. That's dinner. It's the most direct evidence imaginable of how these ancient people survived and thrived. Now let's turn to the clock. How do we know when all of this happened? The answer lies in the layers of sediment that entomb these fossils. Using multiple dating techniques, including uranium series dating on the fossils themselves and optically stimulated luminescence on the surrounding sand grains, scientists have locked in a time frame. These layers date to roughly 162,000 to 119,000 years ago. This was long before the first cities were ever built. It was tens of thousands of years before the invention of farming. This was before almost anything we would recognize as recorded history. And yet people were here. They were organized. They were moving across the landscape, hunting and surviving in a world radically different from our own. So what exactly is this lost world of Sundaland? To understand it, you have to rewind the planetary clock to the Pleistocene, a period we commonly call the Ice Age. During glacial periods, immense amounts of Earth's water were locked up in continent-sized ice sheets, causing global sea levels to fall by as much as 120 meters, or nearly 400 feet. The island we know today as Java, Sumatra, and Borneo weren't islands at all. They were the mountainous highlands on a giant continuous landmass, an extension of mainland Asia nearly the size of Western Europe. This exposed shelf was a world of vast, low-lying plains, threaded by enormous river systems. It was a mosaic of environments, from dense rainforests to open grasslands and savanna, teeming with life. It was a superhighway for migration, allowing fauna and hominins to walk from what is now Thailand all the way to Borneo. Then, as the Ice Age ended and the planet warmed, the glaciers melted. The oceans rose, and over thousands of years, Sundaland drowned, taking its world and its stories with it. A key part of this discovery was not just finding the fossils, but understanding where they were found. The research team also mapped a hidden highway, the ancient Solo River Valley system, now completely submerged. If you've heard of the Java Man, or the rich fossil beds of the Solo River on land, this is the missing piece of the puzzle. This is the downstream extension of that very same river, an ancient corridor that guided animals and the humans who hunted them across the vast landscape. The logic is simple and timeless. Follow the river, find the life. Rivers provide fresh water, attract game, and create fertile floodplains. For a hunter-gatherer population, this river valley wasn't just a path, it was a lifeline. So let's put it all together. The evidence is a powerful, multi-layered narrative. First, we have the skull fragments of Homo erectus, found underwater, confirming a human presence on this lost land. Second, we have over 6,000 animal fossils from at least 36 different species, painting a vivid picture of the world they inhabited. Third, we have the undeniable cut marks on those bones, proving that these weren't just passive observers. They were active, skilled hunters. Fourth, we have the dates, locked in by rigorous science, placing this activity deep within the Pleistocene between 162,000 and 119,000 years ago. And finally, we have the context, a whole drowned world, Sundaland, and its primary artery, the Solo River, revealing not just that people were here, but where they lived, how they moved, and what they ate. This isn't just a cool discovery, it's a detailed map of human adaptation and survival. It's a testament to how resilient, how resourceful, and how widespread our ancestors have always been, thriving in worlds that we can now only glimpse through science. Our story begins here, but the seafloor still holds countless chapters we haven't even begun to read. This discovery is just the first page. Next up, we'll explore what else the ancient Solo River is hiding. We'll reconstruct the lives of these Stone Age hunters and see how the very ocean that buried their world also managed to keep their oldest stories safe for us to find. Let's dive deeper. What if I told you that the story we've been telling ourselves about our deep past is missing its most dramatic chapters? That entire worlds, teeming with life and echoing with the footsteps of our ancestors, have been erased from the map. Not by volcanoes or asteroids, but by the slow, relentless rise of the ocean. We picture our early relatives as simple figures, wandering a static landscape. But the truth is far more complex and far more exciting. What if Homo erectus wasn't just a wanderer with a stick, but a creature of profound intellect and foresight? A strategist, capable of coordinated hunts and complex multi-stage planning that would rival the predators of today. This isn't speculation. This is a story written in bone and stone, a story that forces us to reconsider the dawn of human ingenuity. That's the shock. Now let me explain. The traditional view of early hominins often paints them as opportunistic scavengers, taking what they could from the kills of more powerful predators. But a growing body of evidence is dismantling that picture piece by piece. New evidence points to sophisticated hunting techniques emerging as far back as 140,000 years ago, and likely much earlier. We're seeing patterns that speak to a level of cognitive function previously thought to be exclusive to our own species, Homo sapiens. We're talking about organized drives, where groups would work together to herd animals over vast distances. This requires communication, an understanding of animal psychology, and a shared goal. We see timed pursuits, where hunters would anticipate the path of a herd and intercept it, a feat that requires spatial reasoning and the ability to predict future events. And the tool use, it looks less like chance and more like choreography. The right tool for the right job, prepared in advance, carried over long distances. This isn't just about making a sharp rock. It's about a mental toolkit, a plan. We're not talking random scavenging from a lion's leftovers. The evidence shows systematic disarticulation of entire carcasses, from the largest bones down to the smallest. This is primary access. They were the ones making the kill. We're talking intent. And the most stunning proof of this forgotten world of master hunters didn't come from a dusty dig in a desert. It came from the deep. And then there's the place it all surfaced, the first underwater hominin fossil locality ever identified. Imagine the scene, a team of divers descending into the quiet twilight of a drowned river valley. They're not looking for shipwrecks or treasure, they're looking for us. They follow the contours of a landscape that hasn't seen the sun in millennia, and their lights fall upon bones, the remains of our own ancestors, lying alongside the very animals they hunted. They found the remains of stegodon, deer, and antelope. This wasn't just a random assortment. It was a snapshot of an entire ecosystem. And stegodon, by the way, were absolute units. These were relatives of modern elephants, with some species standing a staggering 13 feet tall at the shoulder, weighing over 12 tons. Taking down an animal like this isn't an act of impulse. It's a military operation. It requires a large, coordinated group, unwavering courage, and a brilliant strategy. This isn't a jungle story, where hunters could use dense foliage for cover. It's a grassland one. The fossil assemblage paints a clear picture of a wide-open savanna, a world of vast horizons where both predator and prey could see for miles. A savanna that once stretched, dry and sun-baked, precisely where waves roll now. So how did an entire savanna, a world of giant elephants and the hominins who hunted them, end up under the sea? The answer lies in the planet's natural rhythm of ice and warmth. For millions of years, Earth has cycled through glacial periods, ice ages, and warmer interglacial periods. During the peaks of the ice ages, colossal ice sheets, miles thick, covered huge portions of the northern hemisphere. So much of the world's water was locked up in this ice that global sea levels plummeted by as much as 120 meters, or nearly 400 feet. But as the climate warmed and the ice sheets melted, that water returned to the oceans. The result was a dramatic and, in human terms, rapid sea level rise. Oceans surged and coastlines retreated, sometimes by miles within a single generation. Entire landscapes, vast coastal plains that had been exposed for tens of thousands of years, were swallowed by the waves. These weren't marginal lands. They were often the most productive environments on the planet. These exposed continental shelves became sprawling savannas, rich with rivers, estuaries, and abundant game. They were the hunting grounds, the migration corridors, the superhighways of the Pleistocene world. For early humans, these coastal plains were prime real estate. Early coastal camps were swallowed. Later, as human societies grew more complex and settlements became more permanent, the same rising water erased whole chapters of our history along these low-lying shores. We have always been drawn to the coast for its resources, its moderate climate, and its transport links. We built at the edge, and the edge moved. And this wasn't a localized event. It happened all over the world. In Europe, the area that is now the North Sea was once a vast inhabited plain called Doggerland, connecting Britain to the continent. In Southeast Asia, the islands of Sumatra, Borneo, and Java were part of a single landmass known as the Sunda Shelf, a cradle of biodiversity and human migration. Off the coast of Australia, submerged landscapes hold the key to understanding the continent's first arrivals. In each case, a world was lost to the water. This flips a fundamental assumption of archaeology on its head. For over a century, we have searched for our origins on land, in caves and river valleys. But what if the most important sites, the places where human culture and cognition took their greatest leaps, are now offshore? Finding these lost worlds is the new frontier. It requires a fusion of disciplines: geology to map the ancient coastlines, oceanography to understand the currents that buried or exposed them, and a new kind of archaeology armed with cutting-edge technology. Marine geophysicists use side-scan sonar to create detailed maps of the sea floor, revealing old riverbeds and shorelines invisible from the surface. Teams then deploy remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, to investigate promising targets without risking human divers. They can even extract sediment cores, long tubes of mud from the sea floor that act like time capsules, preserving ancient pollen, charcoal from campfires, and microscopic artifacts. And when we do find a site, the evidence is profound. The tools and bones from this drowned savanna suggest planning, cooperation, and memory. The ability to remember the seasonal movements of herds, to map the landscape in your mind, to teach these strategies to the next generation. This is not just survival. It is culture in its infancy. It is strategy. If our ancestors were already this capable, this organized, so long ago, then the entire timeline for the development of complex human behavior stretches further and further back into the past. And if sea level rise has repeatedly redrawn the map of the world, then countless chapters of our own story are sitting right now in the cold, dark quiet of the continental shelves, waiting to be found. So the question isn't simply, were they advanced? The evidence is beginning to shout that they were. The real question is, how much of that advancement, how many of their stories have we lost to the sea? Every artifact brought to the surface is a word from a forgotten language, a sentence from a lost book. And what happens when we finally dive deep enough to read it? We may find that the story of us is far older and far grander than we ever dared to imagine. Imagine for a moment that our maps are wrong, not just slightly inaccurate, but fundamentally incomplete. Imagine that a huge portion of what we now see as the shallow seas of Southeast Asia wasn't ocean at all. Picture a world where you could walk from modern-day Malaysia to Borneo, or from Thailand to the islands of Indonesia, without ever getting your feet wet. This isn't a forgotten myth or a fantasy of a lost civilization like Atlantis. This is a geological and archaeological reality, a world that existed within the span of human history. It was a vast, continuous landmass, a subcontinent teeming with life, and it has a name, Sundaland. To understand where it went, we have to travel back in time, to the peak of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago. During this period, known as the last glacial maximum, the Earth's climate was profoundly different. Global temperatures were much colder, and colossal ice sheets, some several kilometers thick, blanketed much of North America, Europe, and Asia. All that ice had to come from somewhere. It was water, pulled directly from the planet's oceans and locked away as glaciers. The effect was staggering. Global sea levels plummeted, sitting over 120 meters, that's nearly 400 feet, lower than they are today. And as the oceans retreated, they unveiled a hidden world. This is Sundaland. At its greatest extent, it was a colossal landmass of about 7.7 million square miles, a continuous shelf that connected the Malay Peninsula with the islands we now know as Sumatra, Java, and Borneo. To put that into perspective, that's a land area larger than the entire continent of Australia. It wasn't just a coastal fringe. It was a world unto itself with its own unique ecosystems and geography. This wasn't a barren wasteland. Paleo-environmental studies show that Sundaland was a rich mosaic of environments. Vast open savanna corridors, similar to those in Africa today, were interspersed with dense tropical rainforests. 4 massive river systems, now mostly submerged, carved their way across these plains, creating fertile floodplains and mangrove-lined estuaries along the distant coast. This created a perfect corridor for the migration of both animals and early modern humans moving out of Africa and across Asia. And people were there. For tens of thousands of years, this was home. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans inhabited these lands. They hunted the unique megafauna of the region, fished in the rich rivers, and foraged in the diverse forests. Over time, they established settlements, built communities, and developed cultures. They lived on what was, to them, stable, permanent land. But it wasn't. Then, the world began to warm. Starting around 19,000 years ago, the great ice sheets that had held the world's water hostage began to melt. This wasn't a gentle thaw. It happened in dramatic pulses of rapid climate change. Torrents of meltwater poured back into the oceans, and sea levels began to rise relentlessly. For the people living on Sundaland, the world began to disappear. Between roughly 14,000 and 7,000 years ago, the sea didn't just creep in, it sprinted. On the flattest parts of the plain, the shoreline could have advanced by several kilometers within a single human lifetime. The great rivers that once flowed across the plains drowned, their valleys transformed into marine channels. Entire valleys became straits, isolating populations and turning what were once inland mountains into new islands. The vast, continuous plains that had defined their world for millennia were swallowed by the waves, becoming what we now know as the South China Sea, the Java Sea, and the Gulf of Thailand. A landmass larger than Australia, submerged, its stories and secrets buried beneath the water. So this raises a wild and profound question. If a continent-sized landmass like Sundaland could sink beneath the waves, what else is hiding just off our modern coasts? What other lost landscapes and human stories are preserved under the sea? The search for these submerged worlds is one of the most exciting frontiers in archaeology. Off India's Gulf of Khambat, sonar surveys in 2002 revealed what appeared to be vast, geometric structures buried beneath meters of silt, miles from the current shore. Dredged artifacts, including pottery, beads, and even human remains, were dated to as far back as 9,500 years ago, suggesting a sprawling ancient city from a time when the sea level was much lower. While the site remains controversial and requires more investigation, it points to the incredible potential of what might be out there. Further east, off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island, lies a massive underwater rock formation with uncanny, seemingly man-made features. Huge, flat terraces, sharp right angles, and what look like carved steps. Is it a natural geological phenomenon, a product of sandstone fracturing? Or is it a monumental structure carved by an ancient culture and submerged by rising seas? The debate rages, but it forces us to consider the possibility of sophisticated societies living on coastlines that no longer exist. And it's not just speculation. In Europe, the North Sea hides another lost world called Doggerland, which once connected Great Britain to the continent. It was a heartland of Mesolithic culture, a rich landscape of hills, rivers, and marshes. We know this for a fact because for decades fishing trawlers have been pulling up the evidence from the seafloor, exquisitely crafted flint tools, the bones of mammoths and reindeer, and even the skulls of the people who lived there. Doggerland is not a myth. It's an underwater archaeological site the size of a country. Our modern maps are young and fleeting. The seafloor has a much longer memory. It remembers older addresses, ancient shorelines, and forgotten homelands. But how do we read this memory? How can scientists possibly date a ruin or a landscape that has been buried in total darkness for thousands of years? One of the most powerful tools is a technique called optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL. It's a brilliant method for finding out the last time a grain of sand was exposed to sunlight. Think of individual grains of quartz or feldspar in the sand as microscopic, rechargeable batteries. When they are exposed to sunlight, their stored energy is bleached away, effectively resetting their clock to zero. But as soon as they are buried by a collapsing wall, a silt deposit in a river, or a rising tide, they are shielded from light. In the darkness, they begin to absorb natural radiation from the surrounding sediment, and their energy charge starts to build up at a predictable rate. To read this hidden clock, scientists take a core sample, carefully protecting it from light. In the lab, under safe red light conditions, they expose these grains to a specific wavelength of light. This stimulation forces the grains to release their stored energy as a flash of luminescence. By measuring the intensity of this light, researchers can determine how much energy the grain has accumulated. They then measure the background radiation of the sample's original location to know the rate of charge. With those two values, they can calculate with remarkable accuracy how long it's been since those grains last saw the sun. This tells you precisely when a surface was buried. It can date the collapse of a structure, the silting up of a harbor, or, crucially for our story, the exact moment a prehistoric beach was submerged by rising seas. It's like finding a timestamp hidden in the sand itself. OSL is just one tool in an expanding technological arsenal. The next decade of underwater exploration will be a treasure hunt with unprecedented capabilities. High-resolution multi-beam sonar on research vessels can map vast swathes of the seafloor in stunning 3D, revealing the faint outlines of drowned river valleys and coastlines. Sub-bottom profilers act like geological X-rays, sending sound waves that penetrate the seabed to visualize ancient layers buried deep beneath the mud. And fleets of autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, can fly methodical surveys in deep or dangerous waters, collecting data with a precision divers could never achieve. These technologies allow archaeologists to pinpoint promising locations for taking sediment cores, which provide the physical samples for OSL and radiocarbon dating to lock down timelines. Finally, powerful AI and geographic information systems can stitch all of this disparate data together, creating immersive, scientifically accurate virtual reality models of these lost worlds. Ancient maps you can literally walk through. Sundaland, then, isn't just a ghost on our maps. It's a powerful, tangible reminder of a fundamental truth about our planet and our place on it. Coastlines are not fixed. They are fluid. The inundation that submerged Sundaland happened over thousands of years. Today we are witnessing sea level rise on a scale of decades. The story of Sundaland is a history lesson and a warning. Throughout history, civilizations have faced this reality. They adapt, migrating and rebuilding. Or, if the change is too rapid, they vanish, their stories lost to the water. For millennia, humans have been drawn to the coasts. We build our cities, our ports, and our lives by the water. The story of Sundaland proves that if our ancestors did the same, then a huge part of our shared human history might now be sleeping just beneath the waves. With each new core sample, each sonar survey, and each grain of sand that gives up its secret, we are just beginning to wake those stories up.